Organs already set up, the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, the GATT, which is not the name of a cat, by the way, it's the General Agreement on Trades and Tariffs, which will create an omni-nation closed system of export-import, which we must join or die. All nations must trade today or die, will be established by the end of April or the end of September, but it's coming. And this has, the crowning part of this was that Mr. Bush, whom I respect an awful lot, of course, and Mikhail Sergeyevich, to whom I give the respect due to him, whatever that is, and the others, and François Mitterrand and Kohl, they have now declared the USA a European power. And there is a thing called the Council of Security and Cooperation in Europe, the CSC, which you may not know about, but it is assuming the governing functions of this new concentric, tricircle concentric structure. And the chosen president of that CSCE is going to be Mikhail Sergeyevich Gorbachev. This is a matter of public record. Now, if you want to know is this fantasy or reality, just think about the Gulf. You know, we know 6,000 years of history very well. We know it in detail. We know what they ate 6,000 years ago. We know what the women put on as cosmetics. We know an awful lot. Never in that 6,000 years did the whole community of nations make one moral consensus. Never once. Until 1991. Saddam Hussein Tigriti, a butcher and a pig and a killer, marched into Kuwait thinking he had our say-so. He was wrong. And between that and January 15, January 16, midnight, all the nations except three, and they don't matter a hoot, but including Red China and the USSR, agreed that we should stop him and we should fit an army out, a coalition force as they called it. This was a moral consensus. I'm not saying it's morally good or morally bad, but it was a moral consensus. It was the first time in history the community acted with a community of power. And indeed, we did get in, and we did root him out of Kuwait. What's going to happen in the rest, for the rest of it is something else. That was the first moral consensus. There are going to be other moral consensuses by the community, the international community. It is here, and it is being installed. The sea change is taking place. You can follow it very closely if you read between the lines, or read those that write about it who are insiders in it, but it is a fact. Now, the difficulty arises for us in our mission about human life. It's already hitting you in the face. This is being run on the demonic energy of the great death wish. And it's worse than that. It's more ominous than that. You know, in the history of man, the story of man, there are two major hinge moments, and you must reflect on them. The first hinge moment was in what is called the Garden of Eden, when this man and this woman, whom I have to meet someday and talk with about what they did to me, made a decision which affected the whole human race. And when the Bible presents them groveling in their guilt, there are two other people present besides Adam. You must blame Adam, you know, even though he said the woman gave you to eat. But with typical man grumbling, placing the blame on the little woman. But besides Adam, the author of my misery, there was Lucifer, represented as a serpent, but he was there. Ye shall be as gods. And there was a third person whom God referred to as the woman. And you will lie in wait for her heel. She was there. The second hinge moment was on an ugly knob of hill outside ancient Jerusalem at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, one Friday, 1957 years ago, as we calculate time, on which a man hung dying, trying to breathe, and ultimately at one given moment his lungs were so full of liquid he could give out one loud breath and he could never draw it back, and he was dead. In a few minutes he was a cadaver. He was dead. It was Jesus. And present at his death there was Lucifer. Christ himself, a week before his death, said, "You are the children of Lucifer and you want to kill me." With that clarity Jesus had. And there was Mary standing by the cross, and the decision Jesus made then affected the whole human race. A second hinge moment. Now, don't you see this as clearly as the nose in my face, or the nose in anybody's face for that matter? Don't you see that we are at a hinge moment. Why? Because once the nations have agreed that they will use the pro-death, anti-life method of governing because they have to in their reckoning, that they are making a decision which affects the whole race of man. And without talking out of court, I wish we could publish the documents we already possess on the codified plans for dealing with African populations, dealing with Eastern European populations, dealing with China's population. These are not haphazard things. They are planned very carefully, backed by billions. But don't you see that this attitude is again man deciding about the fate of the human race? And if it's a hinge moment, truly a hinge moment, you're going to have that gentleman we always refer to in Ireland as Old Nick, or the old bastard. Quite respectfully, by the way, we have a great respect for the old bastard in Ireland. And there's Mary. It's a hinge moment because they are deciding the fate of the human race. And once we get onto that plane, once we start dealing with the whole human race, we're dealing with the family of man. And as the family of man, we're the children of God. And God is directly implicated. It's no longer the French killing the German, or the Irish killing the British, or vice versa, or some colonial empire oppressing blacks, or yellows, or reds, or pinks, or blues. No. This is a case where men have made a decision that affects the very family of man, and God is implicated immediately, and so is Jesus, and so is Lucifer, and so is Mary. That's where you are, and that's what you're up against. And you're not fighting merely Planned Parenthood. No, you're fighting that liar and that murderer from the beginning whom Jesus contemned so much. Because Lucifer aimed at taking away from my Lord Jesus the souls he died to save. Now, if that is so, then we have to find out, you have to examine carefully in your own mind why they're doing this. I mean, after all, you meet them and they're very well dressed and the women are educated and, as I said, they're established, respected people. They're gentle with their dogs and their daughters and sons, and they play golf, and they're respectable people in the community. They wouldn't hurt a fly, and they cringe at the idea of beating a child or a woman or a dog or anything like that. Especially a dog. You don't matter. Dog. And they have great mercy for the snail darter, the snail darter. And there's a thing then called the blue-eyed falcon we've discovered in the Persian Gulf. Floods of tears have already come over the blue-eyed falcon. The darn thing is vicious. It bites your hand. One of the reporters got blood poisoning from it, but nevertheless it deserves great. Saddam Hussein should not have dripped oil on that poor bird. He must be a bad man. Pardon the sardonic tone, but now, what is happening to the world? What is happening? Well, I'll tell you, my friends, it's very simple. You should realize this, and probably some of you know it better than I do. Every day there's a movement of capital, a flow of capital and capital investment and capital goods throughout the world. It's trade. Without trade, we'll die or we kill each other. Who does that? What's behind it? What's the vehicle? The vehicle is the international markets. Tokyo, Singapore, Paris, New York, Rome, and the others. And on those markets, there are gentlemen, some women, but it's rather a male club, who play with a minimum of $40 to $60 billion a day on that market, on those markets. They decide if a government lives or dies. They decide on the flow of capital and investment and the creation of goods and their sales. They decide endemic hunger, they decide plenty, they decide recession, they decide depression, they decide prosperity. But it was all right until the end of the Second World War.